The choice Kennedy knew would outlive him. He understood the decision would not end with him. Long after the applause faded, it would keep moving forward, and once made, there would be no way to outrun it. To understand John F. Kennedy's presidency, we have to step away from the speeches and the optimism and return to a quieter realization, the understanding that some choices do not belong to the moment they are made. They belong to the future. And leaders are judged not by what they intended, but by what their decisions unleash. When Kennedy entered the White House, he carried youth confidence and the belief that intelligence could manage complexity. The Cold War was already shaping the world, but Kennedy believed it could be navigated with balance and control. Strength would deter aggression. Restraint would prevent catastrophe. The presidency, he thought, could thread that needle. The early months challenged that belief quickly. Failed operations, public embarrassment, advisors divided between caution and force. Kennedy learned that power did not clarify decisions. It complicated them. Every option carried hidden consequences. Every restraint carried risk. Then came the moment that changed everything. Intelligence reports, secret meetings, evidence that could not be ignored. The world was not drifting toward danger. It was accelerating. And Kennedy understood something few leaders admit openly. The most dangerous decisions are often the ones meant to prevent disaster. He faced a choice where action invited escalation and inaction invited weakness. Military pressure promised control. Aggression promised certainty. But both carried the same shadow. Once force was normalized, it could not be recalled. Kennedy slowed the moment. He questioned assumptions. He resisted voices demanding immediate dominance. Not because he lacked resolve, but because he understood what history did to leaders who mistook speed for strength. This was the beginning of a decision Kennedy knew would outlive him. Not a single order, but a posture, a way of handling power that would ripple outward, affecting allies, provoking rivals, redefining how future presidents would respond under pressure. The presidency had placed him at a crossroads where no option was clean. Only one path limited damage without guaranteeing safety. And Kennedy knew that whatever he chose next would not end when the crisis passed. It would follow him, and it would follow the world. The crisis unfolded in fragments, not in a single dramatic moment. Each new detail narrowed the space for error. Kennedy's advisors gathered around maps and photographs, studying evidence that shifted by the hour. Missiles, timelines, capabilities. Every update carried a different implication. Some argued for immediate force. Strike now, they said, before options disappear. Others urged diplomacy, believing time itself was the most valuable weapon. Kennedy listened, but resisted the gravity pulling him toward action. He had seen what haste produced. Public humiliation had taught him that confidence without caution invited disaster. Now the stakes were infinitely higher. One miscalculation could trigger a chain reaction no one could stop. What made the decision unbearable was its visibility. Whatever Kennedy chose would be watched, interpreted, and mirrored. Allies would adjust their behavior. Rivals would test boundaries. Future leaders would study the precedent. This was not just a response to crisis. It was a lesson being written in real time. He rejected the simplicity of extremes. Total force promised control, but risked annihilation. Total restraint invited challenge and erosion of credibility. Kennedy searched for something in between, a response firm enough to signal resolve, restrained enough to prevent escalation. The solution he leaned toward was controversial. It relied on patience in a moment that demanded speed. It trusted communication over destruction. It assumed the other side still valued survival as much as he did. That assumption was terrifying, but every alternative was worse. Inside the White House, tension thickened. Voices rose. Tempers flared. Kennedy remained outwardly calm, but internally, doubt churned. He understood that leadership did not mean eliminating risk. It meant choosing which risk the world could survive. As hours passed, the decision solidified, not as certainty, but as commitment. Once chosen, it would require discipline. Restraint would have to be enforced repeatedly, even as pressure mounted. Kennedy knew this choice would not end with resolution. It would become expectation. And expectation, once set, is difficult to escape. The pressure intensified as the world closed in around a decision. Every signal mattered. Every word carried weight. As Kennedy's course became clearer, the tension did not ease. It multiplied. Military forces moved into position. Ships advanced. Messages crossed oceans in coded language. Each action was measured, not just for what it did, but for how it might be interpreted. The margin for misunderstanding shrank to almost nothing. Inside the presidency, Kennedy confronted the full conflict of restraint. Holding back required constant effort. Generals pushed for escalation. Allies questioned resolve. Critics warned of appearing weak. Every instinct trained for crisis screamed for decisive force. Kennedy had to resist not only others, but himself. The most dangerous moments were the quiet ones. Delays in communication, unclear intentions, near misses that never reached the public. Kennedy understood that catastrophe rarely arrives announced. It creeps in through assumptions and impatience, through leaders convincing themselves the other side will blink first. Privately, Kennedy prepared for failure. Evacuation plans, emergency broadcasts, the unspoken acknowledgement that if restraint failed, the outcome would be irreversible. This was the emotional peak of the crisis, not the standoff itself, but the acceptance that control was partial at best. He also recognized something deeper. This decision was changing him. The presidency no longer felt like an instrument of ambition. It felt like a guardrail against destruction. Power was no longer about what could be done. It was about what must not be done. As days stretched on, the choice held, not because it was easy, but because it was reinforced again and again against pressure that never fully receded. Kennedy learned that restraint was not a single act. It was a continuous posture. The conflict was not resolved in triumph. It was resolved in survival. And survival, Kennedy knew, would shape every crisis that followed. When the crisis finally eased, nothing truly ended. The immediate danger passed. Missiles were withdrawn. War was avoided. The world exhaled. Publicly, it looked like resolution. Privately, Kennedy understood the truth. The decision had not concluded a chapter. It had written a rule. Restraint had worked. And because it worked, it would be expected again. This was the real climax of Kennedy's presidency. Not the confrontation itself, but the precedent it created. Future leaders would now be judged against this moment. Why didn't you slow down? Why didn't you choose restraint? Why didn't you prevent disaster the way he did? Kennedy felt the weight of that legacy immediately. Restraint reduced danger, but also narrowed future options. Every crisis after would unfold under the shadow of this choice. Each hesitation could be read as weakness. Each show of force as betrayal of survival. He carried this knowledge quietly. He did not celebrate victory. He spoke of lessons learned, of humility, of the need to understand the other side. He knew the world had crossed into a new era, one where leadership meant managing permanent risk, not eliminating it. This is why the choice followed him home. It reshaped how power was exercised long after the moment passed. It turned survival into a strategy, dialogue into deterrence, patience into expectation. Kennedy did not live to see how often this decision would be referenced, challenged, or ignored, but he understood it would outlast him, that the presidency itself had been altered by choosing restraint over domination. Some decisions end wars, others end illusions. Kennedy's choice ended the illusion that power guarantees control. It taught the world that survival sometimes depends on refusing to win. The choice